Joint training camp practices with the Los Angeles Rams begin this morning at the Centura Health Training Center. What can we expect here in joint practices? What does Sean Payton have to think about skirmishes? We analyze that and much more. You're going to get that on today's Good Morning Broncos. What's up, Broncos country? Good morning. Welcome into another episode of GMB. As we go through our morning cup of coffee, we talk about the Denver Broncos. We get you, the fans and the avid listeners, involved as well. If you're here on the Mile High Sports YouTube page, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button down below so you never miss out on what we have going on here. Colorado Sports, you get GMB every day. You're going to get pickaxe and roll with the Denver Nuggets and Ryan Blackburn. He's our Denver Nuggets beat reporter, plus some content from the Colorado Avalanche side of things with Eric Dean, the Colorado Rockies with Drew Kreisman, Mile High Sports, every team, every single day. Well, hey, this morning's going to be a fun morning. I need to lather on some sunscreen here because I've got to head over to the Centura Health Training Center as the first day of joint practices kick off here with the Los Angeles Rams. No Aaron Donald coming to town, but still the LA Rams, Super Bowl champions just a couple of years ago. You talk about Matthew Stafford and his ascendance, obviously his career as a quarterback, Cooper Kupp at the wide receiver position, and you have a head coach in Sean McVay who's been terrific since he came in and took over as the head coach of that franchise there. So the idea is to get a lot of good work in these next couple of days here with the LA Rams before the team plays them on Saturday in their third and final preseason game ahead of roster cuts, where the roster will go from 90 players to 53. So let's talk about what we anticipate to see here. We're going to set the table. We're going to have to recap yesterday's practice in Dove Valley, not a joint practice, but a ramp-up period here for the Broncos as they prepare for today's practice against the Rams. Now, it was a great sight to see some guys back from injury, some names, some key guys that the Broncos have been missing for either the last couple of weeks or a little bit shorter than that, and that is Justin Simmons, who made his return after dealing with a groin injury that has held him out of practice for the last 2 or so weeks. And the Broncos head coach Sean Payton, they have expressed that they just want to be smart with it. They took that approach. His first step into coming back and being fully ready was yesterday initially. Came out there. He participated in individual drills for the Broncos. Didn't get involved in any of the team period 7-on-7 stuff yet. That will gradually come as the days come here. And it'll be very interesting to see whether or not maybe that happens during joint practices with the Rams. Don't expect him to play against the Rams. I don't expect many of the starters to play against the Rams here on Saturday. But Justin Simmons back in the saddle again. Mike McGlinchey, 13, 14 days ago, suffered a knee sprain and was expected to be out a couple of weeks. Well, we're at that point now, like 14 days. That is exactly 2 weeks. So he made his return yesterday in Dove Valley as the practice was held indoor. And I just want to say thank you so much to the Broncos for that because the heat has been killing me. If you guys can't see this, look at that. I've got an arrow that's pointing straight down from my neck. That's just because of the sun. My hands are super tan. My arms are tan. The legs are tan. But the sun has been roasting me. So we got to step inside for a little bit for a cool practice. AC running in there. It was a great thing. But Sean Payton had said they wanted to ramp up for today's practice that we're going to see against the Rams. It's going to be outside. It's going to be competitive. It's going to be hot. In between the trenches there, that's going to be something to watch there. So not only did Mike McGlinchey, Justin Simmons return, you saw Chris Manhertz, veteran tight end, make his return as well. Brandon Johnson at wide receiver, who was primed for that big role where Tim Patrick was after Tim went down. When he went down with the ankle injury, that put Marvin Mims next up in the spot. So you're going to have Brandon Johnson. You're going to have Marvin Mims. These two guys are going to be vying for some more time at that spot, but a good sign for him to make his return after dealing with the ankle injury. Also, just 14 days ago. And then Tyler Beatty, who left practice last week early on with an injury, missed the majority of last week, including the preseason game. He was back in action on Tuesday at the Centura Health Training Center. So a little bit of our Broncos recap there. Really nothing coming out of practice. Like I said, it was a ramp-up period. So it means there were some competitive spots there, but mainly it was just about let's make sure our timing is down offensively, defensively. Let's make sure our coverages are there. A lot of good stuff in the mix here for the Broncos. But I do also want to plug something as well. Patrick Surtain, he did have I think an interception that we had seen during practice. Would have returned it for 6 here. So not only did Surtain have a big play on the day, it was a big day for Surtain and for Mile High Sports because the cover athlete of this month's football edition at Mile High Sports is, in fact, PS2, Patrick Surtain. And look, Broncos country, if you want to get your hands on one of these, let me know. We might do some giveaways, give some out to some avid listeners and watchers of the show here. But in this, you get to know Patrick Surtain a little bit deeper than just football, right? He's into fashion. He's into traveling. He's into, I'd say, just his attire and the different looks that he's got. You get an exclusive sit down where I sat down with him and chatted with him one-on-one. You get that in the magazine. I also sat down with Baron Browning and Kareem Jackson, and they showed off their fashion sense as well. So you can get that in this month's edition of the Mile High Sports magazine. You can also read it online as well. As you can see here, our good friend Danny Bailey, our producer behind the scenes, will show you the digital assets. Here's where you can go and get that there. So obviously an exciting time there, but I think the main thing that we have to focus on here as the Broncos get closer to the regular season. Look, you're going to conclude preseason this week. After that, it's going to go roster cuts from 90 players to 53. So there's going to be a ton of players that you're going to see waived, but the Broncos do have intentions, and they will, to bring a good portion of these guys back. It's tough when you're only allowed 16 total spots on the practice squad, but that's more than it used to be, so you can't really complain about that. I think one thing that we need to follow and maybe monitor here is how many players at certain positions does Sean Payton and the Broncos, do they maybe plan to keep here? I think that's one thing we have to follow here, because he gave us a little bit of insight in Tuesday's press conference following practice, where he had talked about specifically how he and his coaches are looking at maybe building the roster. And I'll give you wide receiver, for example. A lot of us think, okay, hey, are they going to keep 6? Are they going to keep 5 wide receivers? He even brought up the number 7, but he said, we can't just keep 5, 6, 7 guys at this position unless they're going to bring quality to what we want to do as a team and what is in the vision for our offense or for our defense in terms of how many players we keep. If we keep 5 guys a wide receiver, we need to have quality. We need to have all 5 guys who could step up and play in a potential starter role status. And I would say, going back to my analysis, I'm not sure how Peyton felt about this, didn't get a chance to ask him, but we didn't get to see much contribution from the Broncos wide receivers in that second preseason game when Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci were in. We didn't get to see much of Marquez Callaway, saw a little bit of little Jordan Humphrey, Kendall Hinton in the blocking game, but didn't get to see too much from guys as pass catchers. No Taylor Grimes, didn't see anything from him that we had seen the week before. So was that part of the game plan because they had a lead and maybe they were trying to run the ball and then they got into some passing situations that fell incomplete and it didn't work out the way that they wanted? Maybe. But to me, I think you have to absolutely take a look at maybe some other wide receivers around the NFL, right? We already know Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Marvin Mims. Those guys are roster locks at receiver. Now I think we could safely say, Brandon Johnson's another name you could throw in there. Does Kendall Hinton have any run? You got to see a little bit more from Marquez Callaway. So something to keep an eye on here is that Denver is looking at just building with quality. If Denver chooses to keep, let's say, 5 wide receivers, that means they may keep an extra 1 or 2 tight ends who can be pass-catching options for them. That is all on the table here for Sean Payton. And I think we'll get a first glimpse of it when roster cuts happen. How does he build his roster? Or in particular, how did he build the Broncos roster? And we can go in and maybe look at why he did certain things that he did. But that's kind of what he touched on a little bit in terms of the offensive line. He alluded to it. There's a possibility they keep either 8 or 9 players at that position. Now, if I had to give a little bit of an early guess here, for me, I would have to say, okay, you look at it, you have your starting offensive line, Garrett Bowles. You have at left guard, you got Ben Powers. You got Lloyd Cushenberry at center, Quinn Miners at the right guard position, and then Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. I feel like at this point you can also say, hey, Cam Fleming, veteran offensive tackle, thought he did a pretty good job against the 49ers. You put him into that role as well as a guy who can play guard and tackle. You get some other guys, undrafted rookie free agent Alex Placheski, I think has done a tremendous job, could be in line for a roster spot here. I don't know who the other 2 guys are going to be. Could it be Alex Forsythe, who they drafted in the NFL draft this year? Could it be Luke Wattenberg? Could it be Quinn Bailey? I mean, right now, all those spots, as Peyton had alluded to after Tuesday's practice, are entirely up for grabs. So something to monitor there. But Broncos country, one thing we are going to get into on this morning's edition of Good Morning Broncos, make sure you pour yourself another cup of coffee here as we continue to break down all the action. But we're going to hear a little bit from Broncos head coach Sean Payton. He talked about the outside linebacker position, some competition that's going on right there. Also, with joint training camp practices, does he pull back the curtain a little bit on maybe showing some things in practice because you're practicing against an opponent you're going to be playing? You're going to get all the insight here from Sean Payton, and we're going to react to it on this morning's Good Morning Broncos. Real quick, let me tell you about our friends over there at Superbook Sports. You hear that? That's the sound of football coming back, and now is the time to place your preseason bets with Superbook Sports. Superbook Sports is the most trusted name in Vegas, and now you can use promo code MILEHIGH to score up to $250 with their first bet bonus. Win or lose, they will match your first bet up to $250 with promo code MILEHIGh. Don't miss out this football season. Win some money with Superbook Sports in the promo code MILEHIGh. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Broncos head coach Sean Payton is always a wealth of knowledge when we get to hear from him following practice. And one thing in particular, my background as a former coach, I like to try to figure out how can I ask a question that's going to maybe give me some insight into how he views certain things philosophically as a coach. And so one of the things I asked him about, especially with joint training camp practices set to begin this morning at the Centura Health Training Center here in about 30 minutes, one thing that stood out to me was I asked him a question about, do you ever peel the curtain back a little bit just because you're practicing against an opponent you're going to be playing on Saturday? And, maybe down the road, you're going to run into these teams, or maybe this team in February, if you make it to the Super Bowl, if they make it to the Super Bowl. And he said, the NFL, there really is no secrets, but, let me have Sean Payton tell you exactly what he said, his insight, and maybe how he might be using this practice in particular to be evaluating players who may not even play in Saturday's preseason finale.
There aren't many secrets in our league. It's how you want to play somebody when it comes to the real games. Your video, there's so much video on each team. So it's really about the fundamentals of practice and getting additional film and evaluation on a number of players that maybe are still right on the bubble. And I think that these 2 days give us, gives two really good additional looks at guys that might be in that position, and also for guys that are, frontline guys, for them to, may not be playing as much in the game at all, but they'll get a lot of work this week, in the next two practices. I think that's important.
He said, I think one of the more key phrases there, being able to evaluate players who are on the bubble. And look, I think that he's kind of set a challenge out there since he's come in from week one of the preseason till now. You're getting a great look at your starters, right? And you're getting a good look as what he calls frontline players, right? These are the guys that your starters, your key role players, guys who are going to rotate in quite a bit offensively, defensively. But you need guys on the back end of your roster, the depth guys that can come in and provide you with, if some starter goes down, you don't have to worry about maybe missing or dropping in production, but somebody who can step in and play that role. And I think back when I've watched Sean Payton coach teams, when I've seen his former New Orleans Saints teams, he has had players that have come in due to injury and have played and have shined. I think a great example would be Marquez Callaway stepping into the role, even though that Michael Thomas was injured. Marquez Callaway a few years ago stepped into a big role and exploded in Sean Payton's offense there. So those are things I keep in mind here when we look at maybe where the Broncos are at. And we don't know where Denver's at specifically with this process, but this is what we will find out here going into next week as roster cuts happen and we see a finalized roster. And we also get a finalized depth chart where we see where guys are at. Competition is the most important thing. We see it ongoing at various positions right now on the offensive line. Wide receivers obviously open right now. But I also felt it was very interesting to hear him talk about the outside linebacker spot. Now, if you listen to yesterday's morning episode of GMB, one thing we talked about is my belief that Jonathan Cooper should be the starter for the Broncos at outside linebacker. I'm not sure if he heard me talking about this or something, or if this was just something he brought up in general, because this was really a question that was asked stemming from Frank Clark's comments in the postgame where, he was asked about, why was he playing into the fourth quarter? And Frank Clark's response was something along the lines of, you're going to have to ask the coaches about that. That is a highly competitive position right now here for Denver. And like I said, I've been watching him from OTAs till now. It'll be nice when Baron Browning gets involved and comes back, obviously, as he continues to make his recovery from meniscus surgery. But Jonathan Cooper's looked good. You look at Randy Gregory, he's looked good, I can tell you that. I think for him, why he played a little bit longer is just to get, more reps under his belt. as he had alluded to there, he wants to, being able to get into football shape. That's also another thing. And I think he's making tremendous progress with that. Nick Bonito's been really good. Frank Clark, I think he's getting there. I think for him, he came in as a veteran, didn't have really an OTA or an offseason program to attend. So for him, I still think he's in the process of getting into football shape himself. You have Aaron Patrick, and you have some other guys there. And hey, look, Drew Sanders could potentially factor into this mix here in certain packages come the regular season. It's something that Vance Joseph has kind of hinted and he's kind of alluded to there. But here's what Broncos head coach Sean Payton had to say about the outside linebacker position, because in my head, I've got it as Randy Gregory, Jonathan Cooper. Those guys should be the two starters here. Payton has a little bit of a different approach on it. He could be in the same alignment as me, but I'll let you hear for yourself.
Yeah, it's hard for you to even look at the competition and say it's Clark and Cooper, because I might look at you and say, no, you got that wrong, but I'm not going to worry about trying to get it right for you. I think that there's competition, period, at outside linebacker.
It's definitely interesting hearing Payton talk about that because, yeah, I think all of us, and look, our job in the media, we look at practices, we look at preseason games, and for us, we create content, but I also think we pose interesting discussion points out there. Who's going to make the roster? Who's going to start at this position and why? And I think if you look at the body of work, Randy Gregory, how much you're paying him, and then you look at Jonathan Cooper, who's a rising star, in my opinion, here in the NFL, and he's got this ascension-type value to him, and he plays with such a high motor. He's so consistent. He's so disciplined for what we've seen so far through OTAs all the way through the preseason, and his high motor there. It doesn't make sense for him to not start, and he can be your potential future pass rusher of the future here in Denver alongside with Baron Browning. These are things I think that nobody talks about or thinks about enough, but curious to see, because Payton knows the media game. He spent a whole year doing this stuff last year, so he understands talking points. He understands the things that we have to do in our jobs. That's why I kind of have a little bit of a respect here for Payton, not only as a former coach, but just, a guy who knows what our jobs are in the media. But as a coach, he has to protect the best interest of his players and his team. And I understand why that's kind of changed maybe some of the media policies that we've had here in Denver in terms of covering the team. But the team wins, maybe it loosens up a little bit. Maybe we get to do a little bit more here, but I certainly understand and respect the approach here. But Broncos country, I got to jet off to practice here at the Centura Health Training Center. I appreciate you for rocking with me here this morning on GMB. Make sure, hey, if you didn't have a cup of coffee yet, go get yourself one. You deserve it. Make sure you drink plenty of water as well. And we'll stay tuned for tomorrow's episode of GMB as we recap day number 1 of Broncos joint training camp practices. I'm Cody Roark. Make sure you check out the new issue of Mile High Sports on the website, Mile High Sports Magazine, milehighsports.com. Go check it out today and go read the features we did on Patrick Surtain, Baron Browning, and Kareem Jackson. I'm Cody Roark. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.